Hi guys, I want to make myself another little glider from styrofoam plates and these coffee stirrers. Did one years ago and it was pretty successful. I was very pleased with it. I even made it rubber band powered in the end, and I might do that again. But the first thing I want to do is choose a couple of these coffee stirrers, and I'm actually going to glue them in a T shape to make it more rigid. I'm going to use this Poundland super glue to do it. Now every time I try and use these little tubes I end up sticking my fingers together, which is not a good idea, because the problem is you have to pierce the metal top first, and as soon as you do that it releases the pressure because you're holding it, and it squirts out and you end up with it, or I do, end up with it all over my fingers. So I shall push something down in there to break the seal. I could use a paperclip. So I always end up getting this all over my fingers, which is not a good idea. If you do that, get super glue over your fingers, don't panic is the first thing, because you can get your fingers apart again. So just take it gently and you can work the skin apart again. So, but I will try not to do that. We'll soon find out, won't we? The T shape will be much more rigid. Well, I haven't stuck my fingers together yet, but it's not sticking the wood very well either. It's not pushed down along its length. And that's when you end up getting it squirting out onto your fingers. Obviously got a little bit on the skin there. Gently work it off, don't pull it, just gently. There. So don't panic. If you just try jerking it off, you'll probably pull your skin off. So that's our T shape. That should be much more rigid. And we'll now try and use that to make the aeroplane. Just for reference, this is the plane I made years ago, and I'm going to basically copy this with a few design changes. Now you can see this one I did make rubber band powered with a propeller off of a little helicopter thing. So I'm going to do something similar this time. To mount the plastic tube for the propeller guide, I'm going to cut up a couple of strips of this coffee stirrer, point them down at an angle like that, and then I'll cut up this cotton bud and use that as the tube for the propeller. So we'll cut a few of these up. Just in a bit of an angle, just so we can point it forwards a little bit. And it only needs to be about ½ inch long. Four of them, 2 for each side. Glue them on there like that. And then glue that on the bottom. That's what I'm aiming for. And I'll cut this up and put it on there. I don't know if super glue will actually glue that plastic in place. Probably not. So I'll probably have to put a bit of hot glue on there or something to hold it in place. We'll try it with super glue first. I've roughed up the edges of it using a knife to take the shiny surface off it. And we'll just try and put it on there and see what happens. Just noticed that's actually given me a bit of an angle in the wrong direction. I didn't check that first. You really want a little bit of down thrust. Well, that seems to have stuck. I don't know how strong that will be. For the shaft for the propeller, I've got this bit of thin wire. A paperclip would probably do, but I found this piece of wire. I think it was the aerial off of one of the toy radio-controlled cars that I've got. So I'll cut that so it's long enough to go through there. I'll find a small bead out of my bead box here to go on the end of it to give us a thrust bearing. Now I'll bend this at a right angle and we'll make up a propeller. Right, for the propeller, I'm going to use this cotton bud, cut it, push a hole through the middle of it, and then this will go through that tube and then be bent at a right angle once we've passed it through the hole so that it holds itself in place as we turn the propeller. And then I'll cut some slots either end and put some propeller blades on this. Not quite sure what to use. A fairly lightweight plastic bottle would be handy because we'd have nice curved blades then. So I'll measure this up, put a hole right through the middle of it. I've got some beads. Ideally you'd use really small ones like that, but I think that might be too big to go through that little bead. So I might have to use that one that's a bit bigger. I've just remembered a trick from Science Toy Makers aeroplanes. Rather than cutting a slot, you can actually squeeze this flat and then glue the propeller to the flat piece. Right, we're beginning to lose the light a bit, so I'll have to change to electric lighting, but you might be able to see that I've squashed that over at an angle that will give us the right angle for the propeller blade. So it'd be this sort of direction. So as it goes around, it corkscrews that way. I've sliced up a pop bottle. I've cut two pieces off it that I'm going to lay on top of each other. And then I've cut out this rough propeller blank that I'm going to position so it will get a curve in its shape. And I'll try and cut two blades at once so they're identical. I'm not going to sort of put a plan or a diagram out, but that one's about 75 millimeters long, about 20 wide at its widest point. So I'll cut that and then we'll glue it or tape it to that propeller that we're making. That's my two blades. So we need to put them on here. I seem to remember, so I'll put a link to Science Toy Makers. Actually it was a helicopter he was making, but I'll put a link to his video in my video description. But I think I've got a slit in there, put that over and then probably tape it in place as well. At the moment that's super glued in place. I put the glue on the plastic, slid it into the slot because I split this cutting it that way with a knife, and then squeezed it tight to set the glue with my pliers. And surprisingly enough, that actually seems to be balanced pretty well as well. So that goes through there. Then we need to put a bead on it. So I don't know if that little bead will go over it. If it does, that'll be fine. On there. Oh, it does fit. Oh, that's good. So that's going to go through there. And then I'll bend this up at right angles so it goes along the shaft and either tape it or glue it in place. And then that'll be our propeller. But I need to, looks like I need to hot glue that on there because the super glue doesn't stick to the plastic. I might reinforce these with a little bit of sticky tape as well to hold them in place. I've reinforced the join there with hot glue. I've also hot glued a little bit of paper clip on the end there to give us a hook for the rubber band. I've just put a couple of rubber bands on there, so I can test it. I think they're actually silicone rubber bands there, so they're not going to be as good as a proper rubber band. But that seems to be working. So we need to cut out some wings, glue them on top, cut out the tail, and then try and sort out some sort of centre of gravity. So these are the plates. I'll just cut round the outside edge so that we've got the flat bit in the middle, or as flat as it can be. Ooh, just a thought. I was thinking of leaving the edge to give us tips, wing tips. No, I'll carry on. I can always glue some wing tips on if I want to try and make the wings longer, wingspan. Right, the wings on this one are about 60 millimeters wide, and I've got a fold up the middle. Well, it's not up the middle, it's 20 back from the front, so that's a third of the way. 60 altogether, and then 20 back from the front. We've got a fold to give us the airfoil shape, and then the span, that's 150, and the reason it's 150 is that was as much as I could get out of a single plate. So that's what I'll do. I'll cut this up just straight like that, and then we'll glue it on top. I've come up to my workroom because we're going to need this hot glue gun to glue it all together. We want to make it as long as we can, wingspan that is. going to run some hot glue down there to give it a bit of strength, stiffen it a bit. I'm just going to hot glue it straight onto the wood. Might just run a bit of sandpaper up there first though. Just to get rid of that rough edge that was there. That's going to be about another 20 millimeters back, I think. Well, I might make it a bit further. .30, I think. About there. You can see I'm just doing this by eye, not the best way to do it. Yeah, that's probably a little bit too much dihedral. tail. Tail on this one was 120 by 35. What I'm doing is I'm using the markings on my cutting board to get the distance. Right, now I can see how bad I've got the dihedral. That's not necessarily a bad thing, because it'll mean it'll go round in circles. But I might warm that hot glue up and drop that wing down a bit, because that's up much too high. Yeah, let's try and warm this up and drop it down a bit. Better, but not quite right. Okay, now we want a tail. or fin. Right, well, that's the basics. How are we for centre of gravity? Oh, tail heavy, terribly tail heavy. I might trim a bit of this tail off to make it a bit lighter. Still terribly tail heavy. Gonna have to add some weight at the front. Didn't want to do that. Blue tack. Well, we'll go and give that a try in the kitchen to see what it flies like. We'll go for an unpowered test glide. Oh, that didn't look too bad. Well, we'll give it a try with some power, see what happens. Well, I've given it a few test flights and I really do need to cut that propeller tube back off again and adjust the angle, because we clearly have got some up thrust there. And I've had to put an awful lot of weight on it to counteract that. So I need to cut that off and adjust the angle. I'll do another test flight just to demonstrate what we're doing, because I'm actually quite surprised it is flying at all. So that's quite good. But I'll go down there and point it in this direction and see if we can come towards the camera. Well, that was a nice flight. Probably misleading because it was actually climbing into a stall just past the camera. But not bad for a first effort. I do need to change that thrust line though. That's really not helping. Having to counteract it with so much weight. Well, that was all right. Summary time. Well, it more or less flies. It does need more work. But we'll just go through what we made it from. A couple of coffee stirrers. Put into a T shape to give it extra rigidity. The wings, tail and fin are all made from styrofoam plates. The propeller is made from a cotton bud for the main section there, and a pop bottle cut into propeller shapes. That's a cotton bud tube there, piece of wire, little glass bead there to give us a thrust bearing, a little bit of bent paper clip at the end there for the tail, for the back of the rubber band to hook onto. 60mm, 20mm, and what did I say, 150 I think, something like that. And the biggest mistake I've made there is I didn't trim this wood properly, and we've got up thrust rather than down thrust, and that is causing a problem trying to trim it, so I've had to put lots of weight on there just to keep it down a bit. So more work required to make it fly well.